So,
Introductions.
my name is Rob Bevins. For those of you who haven't met me, if this is your first time watching me demonstrate, you're fortunate. All the others, I apologize, but we'll try and make it as painless as possible. I am a wood turner. I'm a bandsaw person. I don't make furniture. I go to Raoul for that. But I know at one time or another, we have all run into a board like this, where about the only one that would like a board like this, which you can plane it down if it was all even. You can do about 5/8 inch, but it's also warped this way too. So Raoul would like this because it'd be about a piece of veneer by the time you got it flat. Well, instead of throwing in the wood or saving it from the burn pile, I decided I'm going to turn something out of it. So we're going to actually turn a manta ray. Now, if you're only doing one of them, you can easily just print out a pattern, put the pattern on the board with a little bit of adhesive, and cut it out. But when you're doing a few of them, make a template, put the template out, and then you can do multiple. You're going to take it to your bandsaw, you're going to cut out. Once again, if you're doing multiple, cut them all out at the same time. Before going to the next step, it's just easier than going all the way back around. But at that point, you're going to end up with this. Then take it over to the drill press because we need all the tools in the shop. And I put my Forstner bit on it because it's the exact measurements for my 2-inch chuck. And I put a mortise in the top where, as you can see, the curve is this way. This is the top. Take the top and I mount it, but we want to turn both sides of it. So we're going to turn the bottom half of it first and then the top, but in order to turn the top of it, we've got to make a mortise. So we're going to actually make double mortises. So you can do the mortise in a couple different ways. Because I know the size of my chucks and I have the right drill bit, I could put up my tailstock and use that to do it, but it leaves the divot, which isn't too bad for the bottom because you really don't see it, but when you do it on the top, you're actually taking out a lot off the top to get rid of that divot, or he has a divot on top of him. So when I do this, the bottom would be the one that I usually use the Forstner bit for, but you can use calipers. If you do this, do not touch both sides, because when you touch both sides, bad things happen. But you can line it up and just touch the side of the rotation, and that will set the line for you. And then you're going to come in and you're going to hollow it out. You could hollow it all out with a straight scraper, but my straight scraper will go dull pretty quick because it is a home-built item, whereas I could keep a pretty good edge on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hollow out the inside, get it towards the edge, and then use the straight scraper at the end to make it a 90-degree angle for the walls so that it'll fit on my chuck. So I'm going to start at the lathe, making sure that wood isn't going to hit the tool rest. I'm going to start the lathe, and I've got it at a minuscule 1400 RPM. It's a very small piece of wood. If it was a 16-inch bowl, I wouldn't be spinning it this fast, but it's 5.5 inches wide and about 2 inches long. It'll be fine. I told you, look, I'm going to line up for you, so just in case something happens. All right, so I'm going to go in here. The biggest thing, and the reason why I brought this one, is the tool rest is a little bit on the tall side for me so that I'm not catching. But when I'm trying to get that divot out of the center, I need a tool rest that was a tool that was a little bit smaller. So just going in here. And like I said, this is the bottom. So at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. Nobody's going to see it. And all you really need to do is make sure you get the rattle just enough so that it sets off Lloyd's hearing aids. We're trying to get that squeak just for you. So let me know if you need some more and I can do a little bit more of it. You okay? All right. So I've got it to the point where now my chucks will fit in it. And now we go to the fun part of, we have this void. So as we're turning this, we're gonna hit wood and we're gonna hit void. And the farther out we go, the more void we're gonna hit. So you'll notice as I start at the bottom, I'm on solid wood, so it's an even cut. But as I go out, you start hearing where it's going because I'm hitting that void in between. The farther out you go, the higher the pitch, because the less wood. So we've got to be very careful, especially when we get to the ends, because as you can tell, I've already chipped a little bit of the wood. I'm not concerned about it because I'm going to take all of this wood off. But when you get to the outside, you've got to be very careful. So we're going to be constantly adjusting our tool rest, making sure we still don't hit, and turning it back on. So I'm going to go back over, and I'm always starting from the center. If I start at the outside and work my way in, there's a bigger chance that I'm going to hit that wood. I'm going to break the wing, and then it does just go to the fireplace. So we're going to start on the inside and work our way out. And it's many, many shallow cuts. Yeah. You're hired. All right. So you can kind of see it on there that there's a shadow. So if I can get it right about here on is a solid piece of wood. The farther out it goes here, the more it's just void, basically. So when I'm turning this, especially if I'm over here, I really can't see what I'm doing. I've got to position myself to where I see overhead, and I'm actually looking up here at the top and watching the wood disappear from the cut that I'm doing on the bottom. So we're going to go through. And you can feel the instant feedback if you hit a little bit too much wood because you get hit by that little piece of wood. And once again, I'm getting farther away from the wood, so I need to reposition it. Because there is so much void, I definitely want to stop every time and make sure that I get closer. I'm getting towards the end of the wing. And then I want to turn it off really quick. I'm going to look and see if there's any divots, like I feel a little bit of a divot here where I wasn't quite smooth. So I'm going to adjust it one final time. Make sure it doesn't touch. And I'm going to make one more pass. You're trying to make a continuous pass because the more that you stop and start, the more divots you're going to have. It's not the end of the world on something this small because sandpaper, but it just means a lot more sanding. So we're going to do one final. And if you notice, you can probably see it on there, I have my thumb on top, but I'm not really holding the tool. I'm using my index finger on the bottom to run it along that tool rest, and that's helping me gauge how far in that tool goes so that I don't push through with the blade. So it's going to be run across, run the index finger all the way along the bottom, and finish it off. And I know I just made a divot on there, but I'm not going to go any deeper on there. At this point would be the time, if you're going to do it, to do your sanding. 80, 120, 220, 320, 240, 320. I did bring them in like this to show that, especially on a piece like this, it really doesn't matter what type of sandpaper you use, it's more the grit. Because on something this small, most of your sanding is going to be by hand or using your drill and keeping it center and taking a lot of wood off. So on something this small, especially with this dry wood, I'd be doing it all by hand. But I'm not going to be sanding because lungs. The one thing I did notice as I got a little and turned it off is I'm not quite deep enough with my mortise, so I'm going to take it in. And I'm not too worried about the outside because this is the bottom half of it. But now we're going to take it, we're going to flip it over. You could sand this afterwards. It's not the end of the world. It's just while it's mounted, it makes it easier to do the sanding. But we're going to flip it over now, put it back in, and now we can start doing the top. So it's going to be the same thing. We're going to bring this up. We're going to make sure, because this is where it's bowing out, so this is more likely that we're going to hit those outside. We're going to make sure that it spins evenly. I am going to offset it this time coming out this way because we're going to try and take the curve out this way. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take off this mortise because that's the part that's going to most likely catch when I'm doing the scraping. And at this point, if I get a catch, it's going to be firewood. So we'll turn it back on, back up about 1400, and I'm just going to take off that mortise. Now I also know that where I stopped is about where the void is going to hit. So that's when I'm going to start catching those wings if I'm not careful. So at this point, because I did use the Forstner bit, I have a dimple on top now, so I'm going to have to take that dimple out or call it a birthmark. Okay, so that is mostly out, but now everything else I want to do now is I'm trying to round off the body. So now, much like a bowl, I'm going to round off the edges to bring it down in and get down to this point here where the wings start. And the whole thing is to try and make it sort of kind of look like it's in motion. So it's straight up, diagonals, doesn't look like it's in motion. You notice that I kind of have a little bit, and I can, there, the wings don't just go straight up or straight out, they kind of do a little bit of a wave to it. But you're the artist, you do what you want with it. It's just whatever you plan on doing with it. My wife really likes these, so I'm probably going to be making a lot more of them. But also, as with doing a wood bowl, you're going to want to work on the wings before you start working on the inside, because the farther in you go, the less resistance you have for that wood, and that wood is going to start to vibrate. So we want to take care of as much of those outside wings before we go in and finish off the body. So I'm going to start on the inside, and same thing, I'm just trying to find that wood and bring it out. I know, looking at the shadow, that that wing is like that, so there's going to be some point when I get out here where I'm going to hit that. And so I'm just working my way in to smooth out the inside to get to that tip. When I finally get out to that tip, I only want to do 1 or 2 passes. I don't want to do more than that because it's so fine that the chances of those tips breaking is very high. So I'm going to go in here. On the tip. And all it is just slow and steady. Very, very sharp tools. If your tools are dull, it's going to catch, you're going to break it. So I brought all 3 of the tools that I'm using are all around nose because when one of them gets dull, I can switch over to the next one. If at home, I would take this, just take it over, sharpen it back up, and get right back to work. But I didn't want to bring in my sharpening tools. So. And you can hear it ting at the very end, right as it's hitting that edge. I did feel it take just the tip off. But I think that'll be good. And you can keep going. Like this one, I made it so that they're very thin. It's just how much time do you have? Another 20 minutes, I can make it thinner, but it's the same the whole way. And I'm gonna get it to where it will end up taking just a little bit more off of it as I round it off. So for right now, I'm gonna start working my way in. Now I've got a divot on the inside where I took out that little hole from the Forstner bit. So now I'm gonna start going in farther here to make that transition between the body and the wings, and then I will round off the top. Same thing, I'm just rocking it, little shallow cuts, many cuts, but far less likely to get that catch. It's still possible, and I have a backup just in case it does, but I can start feeling it that I'm getting closer to the end of it, and I start feeling that wing vibrating just a little bit against the tool. So at this point, those wings are as thin as they're going to get because I've already started working on the body. But now I can go in here. I'm just rocking back and forth, and the only pressure I'm doing is every time I rock, I'm literally just using my thumb and I'm rolling it slightly to put it in just a little bit more. If I was going to try to push from the back, it's too hard to just do that millimeter at a time. So as I go here, I take the cut, and then I'm just barely rocking my thumb forward to get that next cut in. And you can tell how sharp it is just by how thin the flakes are coming off of it. As you start getting bigger and chunks and stuff like that, it means that the tool's starting to get dull, or that you're biting way too hard and you're not letting the tool do its work. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to finish off the wing transition. All right, so that wing into the body is just about as thin as I want it to get at this time, but you can't feel it. But this is extremely smooth because it's just shallow, small cuts. You're letting the tool do the work. If I was pushing, it gets vibrating. It's actually... This will be fun. You can see on the wing, which way? That way, how it's popping up and then back in, because I've been rocking out the inside here, and so this is now become uneven with the rest of the wing. And on a bigger piece, you'd worry about which jaws were in which side because it's going to be slightly off. Normally, I wouldn't take a piece off in the middle like this because it probably is a little bit off center, but it was a time of learning opportunity I couldn't pass up. So I'm coming in, I'm just trying to get that wave. I think that was just about it. So going anymore, I'm going to break it. I did clip a little bit of it. Rest would be sandpaper. So now I'm going to bring it up, back up to speed, and now we're just going to round off the body.